This is the BraveCo podcast. I'm your host, Jason Bellet. Welcome back, everyone, to the BraveCo podcast. This week, I have one of my great friends, Benjamin Goodpasture. Ben, thanks for coming on, man.
Yeah, I'm stoked to be here.
Yeah, dude. Just to give a quick bio on you, you're a father of, how many kids do you have, bro?
Four. Yes, sir.
That's what I was going to say. Father.
Four that I know of.
Yeah. Father of four. Your wife, Kylie's incredible. She's such a incredible woman. You're a businessman, entrepreneur. You dabble a lot in real estate. You've bought back all of your time. You don't work for the man anymore. All that stuff. And I wanted to bring you on here today and talk about some of your adventures, but talk about your mindset, really. When I look at you as a man, and I look at the way that you lead your life, it's really inspiring. And we've got to know each other. We've known each other for a very long time, but we really started to hang out a lot more in the last year and a half, and doing some stuff together. And I'm always trying to bring guys on to the podcast that inspire me, that push me, that other guys can look at and go, oh man, if I had a piece of that, right? If I could add this piece to my life. And for you, when I look at that, like, you have this incredible ability to see an opportunity, to take the risk, and to actually go after it. Now, I'm sure there's some downfalls of it, which we'll talk about, like the downfall of your mentality. But I really think that your decisiveness, your ability to dream, and then your decisiveness, I see it in business, I see it in your adventures that you plan, I see it with your kids, is really incredible, man. And so, for starters, how did you get into real estate? How did you start that? We're not going to talk about that the whole time, but how did that become like the thing that you do?
Yeah, I mean, it goes pretty far back because my dad was a contractor. He had rental properties.
Oh,
So
cool.
I was a little dude, and, I remember driving around my dad's truck, and he would literally go collect rent from like his tenants, and he would fix them up. And in the summer, I would be on a roof with them, like learning how to put shingles on a roof and carrying these heavy
Yeah.
shingles. This is before like nail guns and like where they would crane the shingles up for you. We had to
Yep.
carry them all up
Yep.
ourselves. So yeah, I just grew up seeing what he did, and I saw his successes, I saw his failures. And then
So did you want to be an entrepreneur watching your dad?
no, not at
Yeah.
all. Like honestly, I had a negative mindset with work because every summer I would spend working with my dad, and I
Yeah.
wasn't playing with my friends.
Yeah.
So I felt like work was how we connected. So combination of that, and then college, we had some tension and some conflict with just the finances around college, and it just made me bitter towards
Yeah.
like him and work. And yeah, so real estate wasn't a thing. Even though I went to university for construction management, I studied it.
Wow.
I should have like studied rock climbing because that's all I did. I mean, I just went to school to climb. Like that's was my new passion.
Where'd you go to school?
So I went to Appalachian State in North Carolina.
Okay.
So it's in Western North Carolina. Just amazing. It's a mecca for the outdoors. So that's where I really got the bug.
Is that why you chose that place?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I just started rock climbing, I think that summer. I went there because I love the mountains.
Yeah.
And so I went there, and my roommate was like, oh, I'm going to do construction management. And I was like, cool, I'll do that too. I know that. I should not have gone to college. It was a bad decision.
Yeah.
So, but, I did it and studied that in college, and then, worked for a big company out of college in Raleigh, North Carolina, and just hated it. It wasn't the
Yeah.
culture I wanted. And so it was, it took coming out here to kind of unlearn and heal some of these areas of just brokenness around money and stuff. And I mean, I had to go through like having bad credit and all this stuff. And then it wasn't until, I built a rock climbing gym, I bought the first house.
Wait. Slow down. You randomly said, I built a rock climbing gym and bought my first house. How did you do that?
How did I do that?
Yeah,
So,
because I
I
have never built a rock climbing gym. I did buy my first house, but
yeah, so
did
I
you get
owned
a
a
loan
rock
for
climbing
that?
gym for about 8 years
In town here.
in town. Yeah,
Yeah,
so when I came here, I was a rock climber, and there was no rock climbing community and nothing like that, so it was honestly opportunity where I hung out with a good friend of mine who had a warehouse, and he had a kid that loved to rock climb. She was like, "Oh, I wanna, like, build a rock climbing wall," and he knew I climbed, and so I was like, "Cool, let's do it." And then I ended up pitching him this idea of taking over his warehouse and turning it into a business.
yeah,
And I was like, "I need 15 grand, loan me the money, I'm gonna start Shasta Rock Club, I'm gonna take over your warehouse." And he said yes.
that's
It
amazing.
was crazy.
How'd you do?
The first, year and a half was great, but then we had to shut it down
Oh, no way.
because he sold the building, and literally the day after my firstborn kid was born, I didn't have a job. He's like, "You gotta move all your stuff out." It's not easy to move a rock
No,
climbing wall.
yeah,
So, and then we did all these crowd fundraisers, and anyways, we built another gym, and that's when it took off, and it did really well, and we sold it during COVID, and, I went all in real estate because the climbing thing wasn't that scalable. Real estate is. You can have as many houses and apartments as you want,
right.
but with climbing gyms, the model wasn't gonna work here.
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
I made that pivot.
You felt trapped in the 9 to 5, like, this
It
is
was a
things I can
job.
grow. Yeah,
Yes. It was like when I sold the gym, I was selling a job pretty
yeah,
much. Even though I did have someone run it, but there was just this weightiness and responsibility that I couldn't fully step away. I would step away for a while and then I have to go back to it. So,
yeah. That makes a
yeah.
lot of sense.
Yeah.
Real estate, so how did you get into real estate? What was your thought?
Yeah, so we got married in 2014, and I just had this idea that what if we bought a house that had like a guest house on it or two houses on one property? We lived in one and we rent out the other. Now it's called house hacking. It wasn't a thing back then. So I pitched that idea to my father-in-law, and he was like, "Oh, he's an investor." He's like, "Oh, that makes sense." He was like, "I can help you out with the down payment." So I pitched it to him. We found this property, and we renovated the upstairs, turned it into an Airbnb, started making money, then we lived in the downstairs. It was a little one bedroom,
Yeah,
tiny little cottage. And it made money. We paid our mortgage, and we paid our $1,000 a month loan payment to him.
yep.
And it just worked. I was like, this is working. And so we moved upstairs, and then 2 years later, we bought our next property. And, just seeing that, okay, this is making a couple grand a month, like, the light bulb started going off, and I started just learning as much as I can with audiobooks and podcasts, and just got so passionate about it, and just slowly started buying more properties.
What was the turning point? What was the key to you figuring it out? Because, I mean, I've seen a whole bunch of my friends do this
Yeah.
now, being 44 years old. Um, and I always sit back and go like, "Man, that I wish I would have done that. That's really
Mm.
inspiring." But it's hard to know, like, what the first step is. Like, what was the first step in it for you?
I think typically the first step is it's real basic. It's just go talk to a lender. Like, just see where you're at.
Ah,
Like, see where you qualify
yeah,
for a loan, and typically it's buying a primary home.
yeah.
But I don't recommend just buying a primary. I mean, buy a primary, but it needs to have 2 units so that
You
you
can
can
live
make
in one
money.
and live in one.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, you can rent out rooms if you're, a 20-year-old, you can buy a four-bedroom house and rent out 3 of them.
And then are you taking a loan against your now house to get another house? Is that how you're acquiring more?
So, with the first one, like I said, I borrowed money from my father-in-law. I paid
Yeah,
him back, and then I knew the main thing here was to build trust.
yeah,
Because I knew if I build trust with him, made those payments on time, pay him back,
yeah,
he might loan me money again.
for another one,
So
yeah.
that's what happened. The second one was more of a flip, and it had a lot of work it needed. So he lent me more money to do the deal, and then we really took off when the car fire happened.
Oh, yeah.
So when that happened,
2018.
yeah, 2018 fire, and we got displaced. because it came right near our house. So we ended up moving to Tahoe for 3 months and living with some friends of ours.
Right.
And I was like, worked for this guy, still had the climbing gym. I'm like working, building a $7 million house on the lake. And I'm like sanding and like staining. It was awful. It was terrible. I'm like back to that 9 to 5. I'm like,
Yeah.
what am I doing? Like I was great over here, but now I'm doing this. And I just was listening like Rich Dad Poor Dad, audiobooks. And in that 3 months, I bought 3 houses.
How?
It's crazy. Like the first two were in Kansas City, Missouri.
Why?
It's like
Why'd you buy them there?
they were $35,000 each. $35,000. So, and I put zero money into it.
How?
So I could get the loans and I found the deals. And then I found a partner, a friend of mine, who had cash but couldn't get loans. So it
No
was this
way.
perfect joint venture.
You're like, "I can get the loan if you
Yep.
put the down payment?"
Yeah. I had no cash in the deal. And our monthly payment was less than $300 a month
Right, so
on a
why would you
house.
not?
Yeah. It was
Oh my
amazing.
gosh.
So we did that, and
How'd you find
then
those houses?
my realtor started buying houses in Kansas City, and he's like, "Dude, you should check this out. These are, like, really cheap houses." And
Wow.
so I was like, "That's cool." And then we're like, "We wanna get back to Redding, and we miss our community." So I found a house that a friend of mine would seller finance. So that meant, he had the
Yeah,
house free and clear, no loan.
yeah,
So he financed it to us like a bank. We put very little money down. It closed in like a week. And it was another situation where it had an in-law unit. So we had a renter making money off of that, and then we lived in it. And just those little things, just
yeah.
repeating those simple things. Next thing you know, you have 5 or 10 rentals. And that's what we did. We just kept moving. Wife did not like it.
I was gonna say, yeah,
It's definitely a young man's thing.
it is, huh?
Yeah. But, I mean, it's the easiest way to build a portfolio of rentals.
Okay, to me, this is the idea, is you're gonna pay one way or another,
Yeah.
right? You either pay by working 9 to 5, which
Mhm.
there's nothing wrong with that for
No.
starters, but you either pay by not taking risk
Mhm.
and staying in the world that you're in, or you pay by making some sacrifices up front
Yeah.
so that 3, 4, 5, 6 years down the
Mhm.
line, you've got 10, 15, 20 doors
Yeah.
that is basically giving you your time back.
Yep. Exactly.
That's wild.
Yeah, it's either time or money, and at that point, I didn't have the money, but I had the time
Yeah.
to do
Yeah.
the work, and I was doing all the work myself
Yeah.
and having friends help me and, just shoestringing it, just, like, barely getting by,
Yeah.
but it worked.
That's
But it
amazing.
was a huge risk, like, that first Airbnb, like, are we gonna get renters? Are people gonna stay here? And you just didn't know.
Yeah.
So,
It's wild, man. Like, I think that there's there's a measure of risk that every person has to take in order to get to the next level
yeah.
of anything. And if you're not willing to risk, and which also means that there's several risks that don't work out in your life. And if you're not willing to rebuild yourself or pick yourself up, then
Yep.
you just like stay here wishing
Yep.
and watching everyone else grow.
Yep.
'Cause it, like, really does require, it reminds me of nature where there's a point in which a mother bird will start to put thorns into a nest,
Mm.
trying to get the bird to fly out, and then if it doesn't, it actually will push the bird out, and it's a sink or swim, right?
Yeah. Oh,
It's a
yeah.
and so that bird's like, "Ah, I don't want to. I'm not
Mhm.
gonna leave. It's uncomfortable. It's so
Yeah.
uncomfortable."
Yeah.
But it's so like, unless you are willing to jump out and fly and risk that, then you just stay the same forever.
I think that's been part of my, like, one of my strengths and also weaknesses that I see these big challenges and things, and I don't think they're that hard. And so, but when I get in there, I'm like, crap,
You're
this
an
is hard.
optimist.
Very much an optimist. I'm like,
Yeah,
this is no problem. We got this. And then you go and do it, and you're like, do I want to do this ever again? Probably not. And then, you get it done and you're seeing the results, and, some of that trauma goes away, and you're like, I want to do it again. And you just keep doing it. But it requires like taking massive action. Like that's the deal. Is like that's your greatest teacher is when you make a decision and do it.
where have you failed? Have you failed in any of the homes?
Oh yeah, for sure.
Yeah,
Um I mean, there's different levels. I mean, like, for example, one house we flipped, the well went dry. And it was that summer
Oh,
that the
yes.
ACID canal in South Reading, they didn't allow any water to come through. So when I bought it, did my inspections, the well was great, worked. And then when I go to sell it, it went dry. And so that was a
Dang.
$25,000, repair
Yeah.
to drill a new one. And so we ended up breaking even on the house,
Yeah.
but it could have been worse.
Yeah.
Um, there's all these little failures. I mean, every single property, there's two things that always happen, guaranteed. Takes longer than you think, and it costs
Costs
more
more.
than you think.
Yes, true.
Every single time. There's things you just can't see or know.
Yeah.
And so you always have a line item for like, okay, 10 grand.
Just a buffer
Exactly.
and a date that you want it done by and a date that you
Yeah.
have to, like,
Yeah.
a real deadline.
Yeah. And I would say like the first like proper like apartment building I bought was a disaster. It really was because like I'm trying to get these tenants to move, and I'm like, "Oh, very naive. I'm gonna call a meeting together with all of them and tell them that I need them to move." I
How did
had
that go?
it was awful. So, I had a buddy of mine come with me because one of the tenants was already kinda crazy and sending me tons of crazy texts. And so right when I get there, code enforcement comes out of his apartment. So he already had code enforcement there trying to cause trouble. And so within the first 5 minutes, two tenants are cussing each other out. They're fighting. He storms off. And I'm just like, what am I doing? And I had one tenant that I had to physically move them to Nevada. I like drove them to
You
Nevada.
drove them.
I drove them.
Oh my gosh,
Yeah.
dude, what was that like? Were you
It
in the car with
Yeah,
him?
I was in the car with him. It was a little awkward. This guy was a vet,
Bro,
had one leg. I had to stop several times. He got sick on the side of the road. He was not doing well.
no.
And then the other tenant that was crazy, he 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 kind of made me famous. He literally started spray painting my name on the side of his van and driving around town saying I was making Reading homeless.
No way.
Yes.
Bro.
It was bad. People would be like, "Dude, I see your name on this van." Also see, like, something about Bethel and other stuff, and yeah, so I had to go to court twice to evict this guy. He was making threats. I mean, I was carrying pepper spray whenever I'd go over to this property. Honestly, it stressed me out a lot, and so the biggest takeaway, hire a property manager.
Yeah.
And then always tell them that you're the contractor, you're not the owner.
Oh my
So
god.
whenever I go to the property, I'm the contractor.
No way,
100%.
bro.
I do not want people to know who I am. I've learned the hard way.
That's amazing.
This place was awful. I mean, the first time I bought it basically sight unseen. It was such a good deal. But the first time I went into one of the apartments, I got a call from the fire department. They were like, "Hey, you need to come over here." And they said, basically, I get over there, the upstairs unit was flooding the downstairs unit.
Oh
The
god.
water was like couldn't be turned off of the shower, and it was vacant. I had some tenants move out, and it was disgusting. Cockroaches everywhere. It was crazy, and I was like, "What did I just do?"
You felt overwhelmed, huh?
Yeah. I mean, all that happened, but then I ended up making $300,000
Yeah.
on this property.
Yeah.
It was a lot of stress, bumps, and
Yeah.
bruises, but it was education.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, being willing to jump into a mess is part of, like, being really resilient. I would call that being resilient, right?
yeah.
Being able to jump into a mess, figure stuff out, and see and to have a vision of what it could be is really what it takes to do that. It really is. I, so kinda when we started to get closer in the last year and a half, I was watching you do these, um, like, races. So you and James did what is the 10-man race?
Yeah. It's a
Ex
triathlon.
explain what that was.
Yeah, the 10 man is in Mount Shasta. It's our local triathlon. It's a sprint distance. So it's a half-mile swim, 16-mile bike, and then a 3-mile run.
Yeah.
And it was a big group of us that did it, and it was super fun. The best part of it is the community because
Yeah.
you're going on runs together, you're going to swim at Whiskey Town, you're doing all these like little workouts together, and anyways, it was funny because, like, our biggest goal was to not lose to one of our friends' wives.
Yeah, totally, she's a beast.
Yeah, everyone was like, "Don't lose to Holly.
Holly's a
Don't
beast.
lose." It was just I wish we made shirts, but that was our primary goal, and,
That's amazing.
yeah, so we did it, and it was just super fun, and we kinda got the bug, and in previous years, I kinda started doing some, like, endurance stuff, and I had this, like, one goal of, riding my bike from Manzanita Lake all the way up to Lassen Peak parking lot. It's about 20-mile bike and then hike the summit and then bike back. Anyway, I tried it a while back and for whatever reason I got like altitude sickness, couldn't summit. And so I was like, guys, we
You're
gotta do
summiting,
this.
Mount Lassen.
Mount Lassen, yeah. So I kind of pitched this to James and our friend Chris. And so we ended up doing it and it was pretty easy. And I think because we had all this fitness. And so it just kind of created more momentum to get in the mountains.
Well, it was awesome because I kinda came into the scene when you guys did that 10-man race, and then right after that, James was like, "Oh, we're gonna bike from Manzanita Lake and then summit Mount Lassen," and then you guys did that, and then you were like, "Hey, let's do this other thing I've been thinking about," which was, um, park up at park up at the, trailhead at Mount Shasta,
Mhm,
hike Mount Shasta, which we'll talk about how far that is, and
mhm.
back, ride your mountain bike, sorry, cross bike,
Yeah, gravel bike.
gravel bike. Ride your gravel bike from Mount Shasta all the way to Mount Lassen, which is
Mhm.
100 miles.
112 miles, yeah.
Who's counting? 112
I
miles,
definitely
and then summit Mount Lassen.
yes.
Okay, so that's the journey, right? That's the
Mhm,
whole journey,
yeah.
and you're like, "Ah," you guys were talking about so much. So anyways, I came out to bring pizza to you guys, to deliver pizza when you were doing this. Take me through, like, so you guys actually did it. You James was telling me, he was like, "Ah, Ben's crazy. I don't think I'm gonna even do it." I was like, "Bro, you have to try.
Yeah.
You gotta do it." But take me through, like, how did you decide to even make that a goal? How far did you get? What was that like for you?
I remember the guys were wanting to hike Shasta, which is our big mountain
Yeah.
that we see out of our window, right, near Whiskey Town. And so it really started to progress on that. We just started I was like, "Hey, guys, we need to do this big goal."
Shasta Bali is what, like, 10,000 feet, 9,000 feet elevation?
I don't even know if it's that. It's probably like 7,
Yeah.
somewhere in there,
It's
7
a
or 8, but
good
it's a
hike,
it's a
like,
big climb.
yeah,
Yeah, I think it's probably 4,000 feet of gain.
at
It's
least,
huge, and
yeah.
it's steep. It's the best trainer for Mount Shasta. So, these guys had never been up there, and so we just kept, processing and dreaming up this adventure. I just couldn't let it go, and we had all different ideas of how it could look. Like, do we do it in 24 hours? Do we do it over 4 days? Or will our wives give us fun passes for it? I don't know. James is very like, "I don't think so, you're crazy," and Chris is like, "We got this." And so, yeah, we just kept on, like, saying yes to it, and then that just unfolded into doing more adventures and getting ready for it, and finally, we're like, "We're doing this, like, I'm doing this." And so, I mean, James was just like, "Hey, I'll do the Shasta portion, you can do
Yeah.
the rest." So, yeah, we mapped it out and a lot of scouting. We're like, "Hey, how do we do this?" Especially the bike ride. Because it's, on the 89, which is a really dangerous road with tiny shoulders and massive trucks that come flying by, and we're like, "Is this doable? Are we
You
gonna"
had never done a night ride.
No, I've never even ridden my bike at night, ever.
I get there to Mount Shasta, and you guys had just got down from the mountain from hiking for 12 hours, God knows how long or something, and I was like, "Bro, have you ever ridden at night?" You're like, "No, I've never ridden at night before." I was like, "Oh my god, you're about to ride 112 miles and you've never done it at all."
Yeah,
Like, I just wanted to highlight that
yeah,
because people are listening to this thinking that this is what you do all the
yeah.
time. This is how you take risk,
Yeah,
which is so crazy to me and funny. So, okay, take me through how far was the hike up to Mount
yeah.
Shasta to summit and then back down in let's go through that.
Yeah, so Mount Shasta alone is a big one-day feat. Most people do it in 2 days.
Yeah.
So just setting the record, like, a one-day summit is big.
It's a beast, yeah.
It is. So we went up the Clear Creek route, and it's a 16-mile round trip hike, and Mount Shasta is a 14-foot mountain. So it's a big mountain. So it's over 7,000 feet of gain. So you start super early in the morning. I think we started like 4 a.m. and it was amazing. It's mostly scree on that side, no snow, and some scrambling up rocks and that sort of thing. So we summited, and we were pretty late. I think I told you we were going to be back at probably like 3 o'clock, and ended
Yeah,
up being more like 6. And you're just
or 8, yeah.
or 8. Yeah, it was
Yeah,
definitely dark when we
yeah,
got back, and oh my gosh, like pizza at the car waiting for us. It
yeah.
was like the greatest thing
It was
ever.
amazing.
Yeah, so, come back down. I mean, we all have like headaches from the altitude. You're dehydrated. You're just so hungry. You're just exhausted. And you get back, and you get greeted by pizza. And I'm just thinking, like, we're not doing this, right? Like, it's dark. And then you're like, so grateful you're there. You're like, all right, boys, it's time to start,
One of
getting
the
the
bikes
bikes ready.
so your friend Chris's bike was broken.
Yeah. And that's the other thing is, Chris's bike was damaged from driving up the trailhead, because it's literally this 4x4 steep,
Yeah.
like, back road to get to it. And, but that didn't stop us. You and James were like, okay, we can fix this. You
I kept
guys are,
telling James, we can't leave, like, we can't go home until we fix this bike."
yeah, I mean, you guys were just saying stuff like saying stuff about biking that I didn't even know. I'm like, what are you saying? You need to true the wheel up? I'm like,
Because
I don't even know what you're talking about. So, I mean, that just puts some perspective on my, like,
yeah.
experience
Yeah,
with
0
cycling.
experience.
Yeah, my cycling experience isn't much. And so, yeah, I rode down the trail by myself because I had a gravel bike that worked. Chris had a spare bike, which that was your suggestion.
Yep.
Glad we listened. And that was the journey to start the bike ride.
Yeah.
And you guys followed me down with headlights, and I fell over once.
Yeah, you did.
Fell over. I couldn't even get back up because I had clip-in pedals, the shoes, and it was sketchy. I was going so slow because it was just like crazy loose gravel. And
And you're inexperienced.
oh yeah, and I'm not like a pro cyclist. I mean,
Yeah.
the longest bike ride I've done was 80 miles around Tahoe, and
Yeah.
this was 30 miles longer.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Well, you started off on that bike road, that trip, and James and I watched you on the way down. We watched you fall, and I was like, "This is gonna be a wild ride for him." And then, like, probably around, I kept track. I drove home, woke up the next morning. You had still been riding,
Mhm.
and then probably at like 2 o'clock or something, you were like, "Dude, I don't know that I can make it.
Yeah.
I don't think I'm gonna make it." I don't know if you remember that.
Oh, I do. Yes. I mean, the bike ride was crazy. It was 20, 30 degrees out. It was freezing cold. We stopped at one point, ate a meal, and we were just telling each other, like, one more mile. Let's just go one more mile. And there's some very difficult moments. We haven't slept. And then we saw the sunrise right near Mount Lassen. I remember stopping at a gas station to get Hot Pockets to fuel up and to take a big poop. And then, yeah, from there, all the way up to Lassen was a climb. It was a pretty long climb, and it
Yeah.
was grueling. And we're going like 6 to 8 miles an hour up this long, grueling hill. And, we have a car following us, and tractor trailers are flying by. I fell off the bike again, actually. I like rode off the road and just crashed on the pavement. And, yeah, I don't know, that last couple miles, we had a radio, and our drivers kept saying, "Oh, 2 more miles." And those 2 miles just seemed like forever. It was brutal. And we get to the gate, and they're like
At the beginning, you got to the gate at Mount Shasta
at Lassen.
or
Yeah, at
Mount Lassa, so you
Lassen.
have like 10 more miles to climb or something.
Well, we have another 20 miles and another 3,000 feet of 4,000 feet of gain to get to
Yeah.
the where we need to get to the trailhead. and they're like, "Oh, there's a lady in a green van looking for you guys," and that's my wife, and I didn't know she was coming up there, and dude, the emotions hit me so hard. I was just like, we get to the parking lot, and I was done. I was feeling a little bit of stomach stuff, but mentally, physically, we're at like close to 30 hours in of going
Yeah.
nonstop, and we're at about 100 miles. Well, it was less than that. We're about 90, 95 miles in. And so we're assessing, me and Chris, like, what are we going to do? I'm like, I'm done. And so we threw in the towel and we drove up, met my wife. I literally just broke down.
Yeah, you did.
Called you, and I was just so disappointed.
Yeah.
I just felt crushed and emotional. And it's crazy how much like emotion I felt and sadness and
Yep.
almost relief that we were done.
Yeah.
I've never been in that spot before.
It's such a good spot to get to, um, because I think that if you don't think that you can overcome defeat, you won't try
Yeah.
and you won't aim big. And
Mhm.
I remember telling you on the phone, like, when you set out to do something massive like this, it's just doing it is a win. Just giving
Mhm.
your all is a win. Like, you don't
Yeah.
get to decide whether or not your body can do it.
Yeah.
You just get to decide whether you put yourself in an opportunity to finish that and to complete it. So you guys failed. That was a
Yeah.
failed
Yeah.
attempt.
Totally
You
felt.
tried it again.
Yes.
This time you tried it from Mount Lassen. So you
Yeah.
summited Lassen and then you got on your bikes and you rode to Mount Shasta. And what did you discover there?
Oh my gosh. I mean, we thought it would be an easier bike ride because it's,
It is
about
easy.
2,000 feet of
Yeah.
less gain. But at the same time, it was more difficult because the last 10 miles is uphill in the gravel.
Yeah.
And that was brutal.
Yeah.
It was so difficult. And it was actually colder.
Yeah.
So it was colder. I forgot my padded bike shorts. So I did 112 miles without padded bike shorts. It was brutal. And we got there at sunrise, and so we did all that, and then we had the most difficult challenge yet, the summiting Shasta. We saved that for last.
Yeah. You're
Like that
smoked.
is that a good I was so worked. We were both so tired, and we said we're gonna try. So we started hiking, and I mean, it was disgusting how I felt. Like, it felt so bad, and we hiked in about 3 miles, going so slow, and we just were like, "There's no way. There's no way. If we do this, it's reckless. We're going to put ourselves in danger.
Yeah.
We'll get up, we'll summit, and we'll be coming down from the summit in the darkness."
Yeah.
And it just felt too risky, and so we bailed on it, and, threw in the towel and said, this that was our last go for the season. We knew that was our last shot for
Yeah.
2024, so it was a heartbreaker, but the thing that I loved that
Tell me.
really encouraged me, you
Tell me.
said this and my other friend said this. They said, "I'm so glad you didn't send it your
Yes.
first go because it's a proper challenge.
Me too.
If you would have done it first go, it would have been like, okay, cool, you were capable.
Yeah.
But since you didn't do it, it's a proper challenge."
Yeah.
So that was encouraging.
I agree 100%. We all have to have these things that are bigger than us.
Yeah.
And the to me, like, the boundary lines of life are usually our comfort.
Mhm.
And as long as you play inside of your comfort, you'll always stay small. You'll
Yeah.
never see your potential. And one of the most incredible things about human beings, physically,
Mhm.
emotionally, mentally, even spiritually, is that we have so much more capacity than we ever tap into usually.
Yep.
And so, like, when I fought fire when I was young, I remember we'd get these new guys, and the new guys would always be hurting so bad because there's no way that you could be in physical shape that everyone else is. And
Yeah.
so we used to hike the Kanaka Peak Trail, which is Whiskey
Mhm.
Town,
Mhm.
that will take you up to Weaver Bali eventually. So we'd hike that every single day in the wintertime to go work up there.
Mm.
And I remember specifically this one time, this kid he had just got hired on the month before, and he was asking me as we were hiking, "Man, when does it quit hurting?" And I was like, "When does what quit hurting?" He's like, "The hike, when does it quit hurting?" And I said, "Oh, it doesn't ever stop hurting."
Mhm.
He's like, "How come?" I was like, "'Cause we just go faster every time."
Mm.
And that was my mentality for
Yeah.
our crew is I wanted our crew to gain more and more and more every single day. And I remember when we first started that, that trail,
Mm.
we knew that we had like 20 miles of cutting to do. So
Mm.
we were cutting a fire break.
Yeah.
It was 100 feet wide and I think maybe 15 miles long. I mean, it was a
Wow.
lot of work,
That's
right? Yeah,
crazy.
yeah. 20 guys working on it
Wow.
all winter long. And so when we first started out on that trail,
Mhm.
I timed our crew and it took us like an hour or something
Mhm.
to get to our first spot. Now, what you have to realize is that every day you cut further and further and further
Mm.
away from the trailhead.
Yeah.
So you start with a 1.5 mile hike.
Mm.
By the end, you're doing a 4 mile hike just to get to work.
Yeah.
And what was really interesting is when we started out, it would take our whole crew like I think 48 minutes or something to get to where
Mm.
we were starting work. By the end of the wintertime, we could get to that spot in like 28 minutes.
Mm.
That took us so long
Yeah.
before. And part of that was us being fully committed to bettering ourselves every day. So
Yeah.
I would jog on the straights
Mm.
and I would hike as fast as I could on the
Mm.
steeps. And that was always our thing. And to me, it just it created this mentality for our crew. It created this mentality for me when I was young of pain is a really normal experience
Yeah.
when you're growing. And if you're unwilling to be in pain, then you're really unwilling to grow.
Mm.
And that's as big as you'll be.
Yeah.
And I remember thinking to myself, what a gift it was to find your actual limit. So I remember
Mm.
going on a fire and we had been working all day just at our normal clearing brush and then we got called out onto a fire. So we'd been working like 6 hours.
Mm.
Then we drove to this fire and we were initial attack. And so by the time I got off shift, I had worked 30 hours. I had
Mm.
ran a chainsaw almost the whole entire time.
Jeez.
And I realized what happened after that shift is I no longer was afraid of getting pushed to the limit because I realized like, oh, my
Mhm.
capacity to run a chainsaw is almost unlimited. As long as I still have food, I can get 1 or 2 hours of sleep and water. I can just keep going and going and going and going. And in that way, I realized like I used to look at myself as maybe fragile or limited,
Mm.
but it really opened up my mind to the possibility of I don't have to hold back
Yeah.
when I'm at work. I can actually go all out, not being afraid if we get called out. And then when I look at how this applies to life,
Mm.
it really dictates how many risks we take, how I just think like there's a whole bunch of our life that's being capped by our perception of ourselves
Yeah.
and our perception of failure.
Mm.
What if I try this thing and I don't make it?
Right.
What if I go after this, whether it's a personal challenge or whether it's a business challenge or
Yeah.
whether it's a marriage?
Mhm.
And so I love to get around guys like you. And I think
Mm.
it's so important that every man has one of these guys in his friend group
Yeah.
that's going, hey, y'all, what if we try this thing?
Mhm.
What if you doubled your income? What if you took your marriage to the next level? What if, right?
Yeah.
Everyone has a different area.
Yeah, yeah.
But I think it's so important that you have an agitator in your friend group that is helping you because that's what you did for James
Mm.
a lot. And if he was here, he would say that. So I'm not calling him out.
Yeah,
Like
yeah.
James is so much better at planning than you are. That's it. That's your downfall
Yeah.
is the planning. I'm calling you out. Sorry.
Sure.
But you're planning, right? Like you're not
Totally.
the you guys hiked Mount Shasta. When I got there, you came down and I was like, how was it? You're like, oh, we forgot our water and food.
We didn't bring enough.
Yeah, you didn't bring enough.
Yeah.
Or like you're like, I forgot my padded pants the second time. Like the strong point of a visionary is the belief that you can do it
Yeah.
and the belief that anything's possible. The downside to a visionary is sometimes the practical.
That's why you have an assistant in a
Yeah,
wife.
yeah, yeah, 100%. Yeah. But I think that that's the strength that comes from a friend group
Yeah.
is being able to go, okay, we've got you going, I mean, just before we did this podcast, you were like, "Hey, I've got a challenge for us. What
Mhm.
do you think about paddleboarding across the lake and then hiking up this thing?" I'm like, "Yeah, no, cool. Awesome. Is James coming?"
Oh,
Because
yeah.
somebody's gonna have to look at the details of when we do it and how we do it. But I really think that this is such an important piece
Mhm.
in every man's life is what's the what is like the adventure that you're chasing and
Yeah.
going after and the battle that you're fighting and being able to set yourself up for success in that.
Yeah, I think, even during it, I kind of learned a few, like, mantras or things I'm
Yeah,
like,
tell
I
me.
really experienced, one that I think we like to incorporate with our family, do hard things, right?
Yep.
Is something that we always tell our kids, do hard things. The other one is I relate it to business, I relate it to especially these endurance events, is trust the process.
Yeah, that's great.
Because it takes time to build your endurance base. That's one thing I didn't really understand.
Yeah, it's
I
real.
think like, cool, well, I can just train for a month and be ready for this. But you see these guys that are really endurance athletes, they do this for decades.
Yeah.
And they're building this endurance base, cardio, strength, and it just takes time. And it takes putting in the reps, putting in all this stuff. And it got me really, it's humbling, number 1, but
Yeah.
it requires, better preparation, like, with what you're saying, when we're doing these big challenges and you do it the first time, you don't realize what you need. No
Yeah.
one does it. There's no
Yeah.
roadmap or blueprint, so you're like, "Oh, wow." You gotta plan these things down to the nitty-gritty in
It's
order to send it because it's at your limit. So,
it's
like,
real.
if I don't have the right nutrition, food, water, I'm not gonna succeed.
Yeah.
If I don't start at the right time or I don't have the right layers, it's probably similar for you when you go
Yeah.
hunting.
Yeah, it's true.
It's like,
100%.
I remember we talked
Yeah.
about this and you're like, "Bro, I have a checklist
Yeah.
that like a massive checklist that I have to have these things because it's life or death."
Yeah.
And so on some of these events, it's like that when you're in
Yeah.
the mountains, like, it's wild.
Yeah.
That's why we love it. So the other thing I really started really telling myself is, trying to put myself in these hard situations like daily workouts.
Uh-huh.
And when I'm doing these daily workouts, I started telling myself like, "Man, only get an hour of this. Only get an hour of this suffering. I need to enjoy it because
Mm.
when I'm done with it, I'm gonna miss it." There's something
Yeah.
about like when you're grinding, you're in that pain cave and it sucks. And I just started telling myself, you're gonna wish you were doing this in a couple hours and just enjoy it, be in the moment. And so I'm trying to like stay in that moment, be present, and like actually enjoy the suffer because I just feel like that it does something in you, like your
Yeah.
character, who you are. Like if I can get through this, then making that hard phone call or having that hard conversation
Yeah.
with an employee or negotiating a deal, it makes that feel easy.
It's so true. Cameron Haynes, is a incredible bow hunter. He's also an ultra marathon runner and,
Hmm.
just an extreme fitness guy. He has this slogan. He says, "Train hard, hunt easy."
Mm,
And that's kind of his mindset is if I if I kill it in the gym, then when I'm doing the thing that I love the most, it'll be really, really easy.
yeah.
And somehow, some way, we have to build a mindset that is willing to delay
Hmm.
gratification. I'm
Yep.
willing to give up and sacrifice my comfort today to build a life that is so much greater, grander, better than if I just chase instant gratification.
And not only that, you enjoy it more when
Yeah,
you're doing it. So, like, when you're climbing that mountain, going on that hunt,
it's true.
you're present, you enjoy it. You're not just like, "Oh, I'm in pain,
Yeah,
my knees hurt." You're thriving
yeah,
versus surviving in that moment.
yeah. It's real.
Yeah.
You earn that.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
It's earned.
yeah. It's an awesome idea. And again, I think that anybody that you ever really look up to, they have put in the time, the effort, and the energy and really earned that place that they've gotten to. I look at marriages that I really respect,
Mhm.
like they've put in the reps. They are in their pain cave. They're confronting, they're learning healthy boundaries, they're learning how to have needs, they're learning how to show up. Same thing with if you see a dad who has great kids, you're like,
Mhm.
you don't just have good kids.
Right.
You build a relationship that is that is built on the foundation of
Mm,
trust and effort and energy and
right.
showing up, and same thing with our businesses. And so anyways, man, I so respect you. I love your
Mm,
mentality and your mindset and your ability to grind. And I wanted to pull you in here so guys could both see the entrepreneur
mm,
and the adventurer. And you're one of the best dads that I know and one
mm,
of the best husbands that I know. And it's because of this mindset that I'm going to sacrifice today. I'm going to put in the work today. And I'm actually even going to be thankful and love it
yeah,
and dream and plan out so that I can do these big challenges and these take these risks
yeah.
and grow myself personally. And I just love it, man.
Thank you. I
Thanks for
appreciate
coming
it.
on.
No, I think thanks for saying that. And it's crazy that when we see the people we look up to and you're like, man, I want that, but
Yeah.
we don't see the sacrifices
Yeah.
and
That's
the
real.
bumps, the bruises, and the brokenness. And that's like the whole like social media
Yeah.
generation. And we want things, like you said, we want things to be overnight, that overnight success. Even when you think about like celebrities or movie stars, you think, oh wow, like
Yeah.
you don't see the decades of struggle and the failure
That's
and all
true.
the stuff, and I do think that's probably the greatest thing that rock climbing taught me was failure, because majority of the time we would find this rock climb that'd be so difficult and you would fall over and over again. It'd just be so challenging, and the success, the getting to the summit was so small.
Yeah.
It
Yeah.
was like, a fraction of the time spent, and it really taught you to enjoy the process, like
Yeah.
enjoy the route finding, the problem solving, the community cheering each other on. And then once you send it, it was just so short lived. It wasn't really the reason or the sustaining factor of why I loved rock climbing.
Yeah.
So, I don't know, I just felt like that taught me so much in my 20s that set me up for success in business and future adventures,
Yeah.
marriage, everything.
We're never really supposed to get to a place where we just get so comfortable that we no longer challenge ourselves. It's not it's not really even a biblical model. Retirement was never in God's plan.
Right.
And so I think that this idea that I'm I'm I have this opportunity to build perseverance to grow myself into a place
Mm,
where I can withstand and handle really hard things and ultimately fulfill the call, the reason why I've been put on this planet.
mm,
And I think that for every man, it's really exciting to think that you have a greater capacity than what you've ever seen.
yeah.
And what lies between you and that is being uncomfortable
Mm,
and being willing to dream, being willing to plan, but mostly just executing on that, saying
right.
yes to it, and sometimes partnering up with some other guys, or sometimes leading your wife, stepping out in
Mm,
that. But to me, the the ability to go this year, which is what I want to leave you guys with, is to go this year, I'm going to get comfortable with being uncomfortable.
mm,
I'm going to get comfortable with taking risks. I'm going to get comfortable with pushing myself. I'm going to get comfortable with getting feedback,
yeah.
finding out where I'm weak so I can shore that area up
Mm,
and grow strong. That's what I'd love for you guys to figure out this year. When I look at you, Ben, that's really what you possess.
mm,
You're constantly asking, what's the next challenge? What are we training for? What are we going after? And I see it in your marriage as much as I see it in how you parent your kids and in how you go after the adventure in your life. So that's a challenge, man. I'd love for y'all to maybe pick an area of your life, and maybe it's a massive climb, or maybe it's growing your marriage, or maybe it's building that relationship with your teenage son or daughter that's really hard, and
mm,
you're actually going, man, I'm going to press into this. I know that there's going to be some failures, but I'm
mm.
not going to give up till there's success. Leaning into that and really start to grow that perseverance mindset. So, Ben, thank you so much for coming on, man.
Yeah, loved it.
Awesome. BraveCo men, have an incredible week. We'll see you next week. Hey, BraveCo men. Hopefully you loved this week's episode. Listen,
If you have not subscribed to our podcast, you are already behind. Go ahead and click right here to subscribe to our podcast. And if you have not watched last week's episode, you can click right here and watch last week's episode. And listen, if you want to upgrade your wardrobe, you can check out some of our new hats that we have in stock and all our other swag. Go to braveco.org and you can look at our store there. Have a great week. We'll see you next week.